Pick'em's overrated, upsets activated. It's been a very, very, very weird week of the Overwatch League. I don't think anyone else is gonna have anything to deny about that. Some of the results we've seen this week, the first week of the June Joust, have been pretty unpredictable, to put it lightly. Things have basically turned on their head. And it is partly down to the meta. We're seeing a lot of double barrier versus a lot of dive. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing sometimes Orisa shoehorned into the brawl comps that we've seen previously, which is something I suggested could happen in the meta preview, but I wasn't expecting it to happen too much, but it has happened, which is actually really interesting. And for some teams, it's benefiting them massively. So let's dive into these fixtures that we've seen this weekend. And we started off with Paris Eternal taking on the Toronto Defiant, and this was a bit more according to plan. So Paris Eternal, they managed to take a map, they actually looked pretty decent, but Toronto Defiant ended up running out 3-1 winners over the Paris Eternal. This is what we would have expected, and so, yeah, that's not too much of a surprise. Paris Eternal trying to run this little bit of a brawl style sort of thing, and going on down that road. But Toronto Defiant should be strong in this meta. They should be strong in a meta that favours dive more. But there is another Toronto Defiant match, and we will be talking about that a little bit later on. Then we had London Spitfire taking on the Florida Mayhem. This, again, fairly clear cut. 3-1 for the Florida Mayhem. But this was much tougher for the Florida Mayhem than we would have expected. London Spitfire really turned up to this match, which was really impressive from a Spitfire point of view. They looked like they were clicking quite well. Haddy actually had a really good Winston for once, and it's probably London's best showing this entire season. However, it obviously doesn't mean that they were going to get a victory. However, Florida Mayhem, you want to see better than this. I expected Florida Mayhem to sweep the Spitfire, and that didn't happen. So we definitely haven't seen the best of Florida Mayhem this week. That's putting it lightly. But this is when things... That's the most logical of results in the West region this weekend. Now we're going to move over to the East region now for the Saturday. So, Guangzhou Charge taking on the Hangzhou Spark. Guangzhou Charge gave a great fight here, but this is a 3-1 for the Hangzhou Spark. Hangzhou Spark are bouncing back big time, like I thought they would, on the back of Shy now popping off, this different coaching that they have. They're really starting to click, they're doing really well, and they're getting a lot of value. So we expected them to beat the Guangzhou Charge, but their tougher act was later in the week against Shanghai Dragons, which we'll go over a little bit later on. Then we have the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Chengdu Hunters. So, this is what I expected. It's 3-0 for the Shanghai Dragons. Chengdu looked rough. Like, okay, the maps were fairly close, but some of the stuff Chengdu were running just it didn't make any sense. It really didn't make any sense. And Shanghai were well deserving of their 3-0 victory here. It's not too much of a surprise that Chengdu have kind of been found out by the Shanghai Dragons in some respect, and now the Shanghai Dragons are not going to get caught off guard by this Chengdu Hunters team, and I expect that to run into the future. But that's kind of where the sensible stuff stopped. And then things went a little bit crazy. This is when we stumbled across the New York Excelsior taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. This turned out as a 3-1 for the New York Excelsior. Philadelphia Fusion, who were coming into this week 4-0, only having lost in the knockouts of the May Melee. So this is a really rough result for Philadelphia Fusion, and not only that, they didn't look good. Now, I've heard rumours that Carpe was ill. Now, fine, okay, that's not too much of an issue. But it wasn't really just Carpe. Carpe was definitely off, for sure, but Rascal wasn't playing well. Hotbar looked like his NYXL self, where he was just not good, to be quite honest. This was all round a poor performance from Philadelphia Fusion, and not what we expect from such a good team. So things definitely need to change for the Philly Fusion, that's for sure. They cannot be losing these sorts of matches. But we'll, again, be talking about Philly Fusion a little bit later on. Because then we go back over to the West region later on in the day, and things just get a little bit more stupid, don't they? So Paris Eternal taking on the Washington Justice. This goes to 5 maps, but it's a 3-0 for Paris Eternal. 2 draws. 3-0 for Paris Eternal. I'm sorry, but whoever predicted that If you predicted that, then hats off. You're a prediction god. Because, I'm sorry? I mean, 5v5 Overwatch 2 is more predictable than Paris Eternal taking Washington Justice to 5 maps, but it's still being a 3-0 for Paris Eternal. Like, Washington Justice have not looked good this week whatsoever. This has been an atrocious week for the Washington Justice. It really, really has. Very disappointing in a meta they should be favourable in. They need to be running that dive. They should be running that dive. And they're just not looking good at all. Very disappointing. However, Paris Eternal, we have to give credit to the team from Europe here, because they're running this Orisa Brawl at times, and it looks really good. They're making it look good. And I have to give Paris credit for that. They made it look pretty decent against Toronto, and they won with it against Washington Justice. This is just rough for Washington Justice. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know whether this is poor adaptation to meta, whether this is scrim issues because of hero pulls. It could be any number of things. This is just rough. This is really, really rough. And these teams have got work to do. I suppose that's the way I can put it, but then things just keep getting weirder. So Houston Outlaws versus the Atlanta Reign. This runs out as a 3-1 win for the Atlanta Reign. Oh boy. This is where we see Dreamer in action for the first time for the Houston Outlaws. Yeah, it's not fantastic, is it? I believe Django only played one map in this series and they lost that one as well. So they only actually won the Ilios map with the control map, the first map of the series. So this is a great win for Atlanta. This is a great win for Atlanta. I didn't expect Atlanta to be that good in this meta, to be quite honest, but they've really adapted well, and they're looking really darn good. Houston Outlaws. This is rough. There's no way to sugarcoat it. This is not a great look. But again, I think this is perhaps a Heroes Pool hangover or something like that, because there are so many erroneous results this week that I really don't know where to power rank these teams anymore. Not gonna lie, because we're not finished there. Now we have Toronto Defiant versus the Boston Uprising, and this was a 3-0 for the Boston Uprising. Toronto Defiant. What happened? What happened? Boston looked good though. We got to see Gabe Ulsey for the first time, and he really adds a lot to this roster. Without a doubt, he adds so much to this roster. It looks so much more settled. Probably because we did see Punk at times this weekend, but most of the time we saw Gabe Ulsey. And when you see this lineup, you know, it just seems right. Faith Myungbong, Gabe Ulsey with Stand 1, then I'm 37 with Valentine. That's really going to suit Laurie as the head coach. That's really going to suit where he wants to go with the team. And this is where I wanted Boston to go at the start of the season, in the off-season actually. When I saw them picking up Laurie, I was hoping they would go all Korean and they would, you know, do something. And this is definitely the week where Boston have done something for the first time in a long time. This has been a fantastic week for Boston actually, when we talk about their match later on. And I think it's because the meta favours them so much. Stand 1 gets to play Orisa or Winston or Ball, which is really in his favour. Gabe Ulsey's great all round. And Gabe Ulsey just kind of rounds out this roster really nicely. Toronto Defiant, this is rough. Like, this is not good. You should not be losing to Boston. Not only that, but you should not be swept by Boston. This is really bad. Toronto Defiant, they got the win that they should have got over Paris, but this should have been a 2-0 week for Toronto. So this is not great. Really not great, and there's improvements needed at Toronto, definitely. We expect better of this team. So, moving on from that, we go back to the East on the Sunday. Shanghai Dragons taking on Hangzhou Spark. So, yeah, Hangzhou Spark continued their rejuvenation with a quite impressive 3-0 victory over the Shanghai Dragons. The craziness continues. Shanghai. So Hangzhou look really good. Hangzhou look really good. They are bouncing back big time, and this is what I expected from this Hangzhou Spark team when we saw the rejuvenation towards the end of the main melee, with Shy starting to pop off with this new coaching lineup. I expected Hangzhou Spark to bounce back, and now we're really starting to see that with a 3-1 over Guangzhou, and then further improvement getting a 3-0 over Shanghai. It's been a phenomenal week for Hangzhou Spark, and this puts them in a really fantastic position in the June Joust standings when you think about it. If you can get 2 solid wins on the board, especially with a map differential like they've just acquired, then you're in pole position to make it to the June Joust. Not only that, you're also in pole position to be one of the best seeded in the June Joust. So this is very impressive stuff from the Hangzhou Spark, and exactly what I sort of thought might be coming after the main melee. But again, there's more to be seen in this June Joust. We don't see Hangzhou Spark next week. We see them in the week after. So yeah, also, the next time we see Hangzhou Spark will be at a homestand hosted by Hangzhou Spark. So that is going to be mighty spicy indeed. We have not seen that in a long time, but that is going to be so interesting to watch. Anyway, moving on from that, we had New York Excelsior taking on the Guangzhou Charge. Yes, this New York Excelsior team went and beat the Philadelphia Fusion earlier on in this weekend, and then they go and lose 3-1 to the Guangzhou Charge. Eileen's Doomfist has been really good. Guangzhou Charge are really benefiting from Eileen's play at the moment. That's for sure, over both of these fixtures this weekend, but mostly this one, Eileen was really doing well. But New York shouldn't be losing like this, and it's worrying. It's worrying because there's no consistency, and when you don't see consistency, that's what puts you off. This had the ability to be actually a phenomenal week for New York. Like, a 3-1 victory over the Philadelphia Fusion is wholly unexpected of this New York Excelsior side, but then if they had gone and got the victory over Guangzhou Charge as well, that would have put them on a similar pegging to Hangzhou Spark, which would have put them in a great position to make the June Joust. However, they're now drawn onto a par with the likes of Shanghai Dragons, the Guangzhou Charge themselves. So this again doesn't look great, and definite work on consistency needed for the New York Excelsior, that's for sure. But we have to give credit to Guangzhou Charge. They've looked much better, especially with Jihyun as well. Jihyun's looking great, and we're also seeing so much from Eileen at the moment. We really are, and they deserve the win. I can't take it away from them. And this is, remember, a Guangzhou Charge that has no solid head coach right now, has no solid coaching. This is still a Guangzhou Charge that could get a lot better. So, a team to keep an eye on? Possibly. We also have the 2 Zhous at the top of the standings in the June Joust right now, just saying. Then we have the final East fixture. Oh lord. Philadelphia Fusion versus the Chengdu Hunters. This is a 3-1 for the Chengdu Hunters. Oh boy. This is not good, Philly. This is not good. Firmly bottom of the standings in the East. A 0-2 week, in a week where you should have been 2-0. This is the worst week we've seen Philadelphia Fusion have in a long while. Chengdu Hunters coming off the back of a 3-0, losing to Shanghai, where they looked pretty darn useless, to be quite honest with you. Then they come in against Philly, and they just win 4-head. Gaga looked really good. Nisha looks okay. Monk really stepped it up. Monk was getting outdone by Izayaki hard against the Shanghai Dragons, but really stepped it up against Philadelphia Fusion. And then we're just seeing Leave pop off big time. And then Jimmy as well, when we see him. It's looking... this is a good look from Chengdu, but it's also very much helped by a really bad look from Philadelphia Fusion. They still looked really bad. There's no peel from Hotbar. When you see, like, the enemy Reaper going in the backline, getting a pick on your McCree, you ask 2 questions. How on earth is the McCree dying? Because he's got flashbang. He should be killing that Reaper. Okay, Carpe's ill. Okay, we can excuse that. But why is the Diva not peeling for the McCree? How is that McCree dying? That should not be happening. And that happens so many times against Chengdu Hunters for the Philadelphia Fusion. You have to start asking questions. This has been a really bad week for Philadelphia Fusion, and they need a massive bounce back. Because I tell you what, they are in an atrocious position to try and get to that June Joust right now. Really, really bad. And we don't see them next week, and I think that's actually good for the Philly Fusion, because they need a week off to really get this settled It's been rough, but we will see them back at the hosted Hangzhou Spark Games, where they will take on Guangzhou Charge and the Immortals Valiant. That should be 2 wins, but then again, we've looked at the paper this week and it's not really gone that way. So, moving back to our last 3 fixtures in the West region, Atlanta Reign taking on the London Spitfire. This is much more according to plan. I thought Spitfire would actually put up more of a fight, but this is a 3-0 for the Atlanta Reign. This is Atlanta Reign demonstrating that when they go up against the teams below them, they pretty much thrashed them, and that's what happened. London Spitfire couldn't keep up with the Atlanta Reign, it was quite obvious. This is very worrying for the London Spitfire because this was arguably the easiest match of this June joust. They will go in next week against both Texas teams, Dallas and Houston, and I expect them to lose both, which means that London will probably finish the June joust on a 0-8 overall over the first 2 tournaments. Really, really rough. They have to go into the next tournament, the Summer Showdown, when they will face Paris. That's when they need to get a win. Otherwise, we could see it's starting to worry me that we might see a winless season for London if things don't change. But however, the little light on the horizon for London Spitfire is that there is Sparker next month. He will be coming of age, and that will hopefully sort out the hit scan issue that London have been experiencing in this past 2 months-ish. But it's not looking great for Spitfire. It really, really isn't. I didn't expect them to be as weak as they are. And it is worrying. Very, very worrying. But there's more to talk about in the EU region. There'll be a video on that soon. Philly. Anyway, moving on. After that, we saw the Washington Justice take on the Boston Uprising. I told you it was a good week for the Boston Uprising and an atrocious one for the Washington Justice. Well, this is a 3-0 for the Boston Uprising. Oh no, Washington. Washington are currently below London in the June Joust standings. They have failed to pick up a single map against Paris Eternal and Boston Uprising in week 1 of the June Joust. Would anyone have expected Washington to fail to secure a map this week? Let alone fail to secure a win against their standard of opposition. That is wholly unexpected. And Boston look great. The coordination's there. Gabe Ulsey coming in has really benefited them. They look like a really good team. And I tell you what, right now, Boston, they haven't dropped a map. So what does that mean? Boston are top of the West standings for the June Joust right now. Now, this is actually really good from Boston. And if they can continue this going forward, Boston may be a little bit of a dark horse. They haven't got that much of a bad schedule, actually. When you look at the Week 8 fixtures, which are not next week but the week after, that's when we next see Boston, they play Paris and Gladiators. They could go 4-0. If they can maintain this form, they could go 4-0 in the June Joust, Boston Uprising. This could be a very good tournament for Boston, if they can keep this going. Washington Justice, I don't expect to make the June Joust. I'm just going to say it. I don't expect Washington Justice to make the June Joust. They do not feature next week, but the week after they play Florida and San Francisco Shock. I don't think they'll make it. San Francisco Shock have looked weaker. Florida have looked a little bit weaker, but I still think that Washington are going to struggle. I still think, and especially as they have not taken any maps. They have been swept. So I do think that Washington are almost out of the June Joust already in terms of knockouts, which is very bad. And we did not expect this. And yeah, it shows what a week can do to your hopes of getting to a knockout tournament, especially in this climate where it's 4 fixtures. It can have a massive difference. And it's really, really rough. Last fixture of the weekend was Florida Mayhem taking on the Houston Outlaws. I was betting this is one of the best matches of the weekend. All of these matches this weekend have been 3-0s or 3-1s. So, this is a 3-1 for the Houston Outlaws. This is actually really good from Houston. Really good bounce back from the loss against Atlanta Reign. This shows very good mental fortitude. It shows they have adapted much, much better. And it shows that they actually are still a top tier team. And that's very confidence-filling for Houston Outlaws fans. And very promising. Just to think in this match, they played Dreamer the entire time. And it worked. It worked. Florida Mayhem. This was an opportunity, to be quite honest, to take a win off of the Houston Outlaws, and it didn't actually occur. Which is actually rather sad for the Florida Mayhem. This week they haven't looked as powerful as we might have expected them to. This is again the Florida Mayhem, I think. I hate to use the word sandbagging, but I think they play Washington and Dallas in week 8. That's their next 2 fixtures. I think they'll beat Washington, not gonna lie. I don't think they'll beat Dallas. But that may well see them through. And if it does, then I think Florida will be good when it comes to knockouts. I think they're going to be like the soul of last year, where they come quite good during knockouts, but during the regular season they can be a little bit iffy. It's not a great look from Florida Mayhem. Certainly not the power we saw last month. But it's not crisis time yet. Not like the Washington Justice, that's for sure. But those were our fixtures. It was a very odd weekend. I don't think we can really go against that. Pick'ems have just gone poof, basically. Something we don't look at all that often is the overall standings. Shanghai Dragons topped them with Houston Outlaws 2nd, Florida Mayhem 3rd, Dallas 4th. We didn't see Dallas this weekend. Philadelphia Fusion in 5th, Chengdu 5th. Chengdu 5th with them as well on joint records. That's a little bit odd. Washington Justice in 7th, Toronto in 8th. Seoul Dynasty down in 9th, but they haven't been seen this weekend, nor have the San Francisco Shock, who are the 10th place team. Both of those teams will be in action next weekend. I expect them to start climbing that leaderboard, to be quite honest. It could be very interesting. We also get Dallas San Francisco next weekend, which is going to be, oh my word. That's going to be so interesting. Atlanta Reign up in 11th. Hangzhou Spark making their way up to 12th now, and I think they will keep climbing. Boston Uprising up in 13th as well, and a little bit more climbing as well. Los Angeles Gladiators down in 14th at the moment, but again, we didn't see them this week, so we have to take that with a pinch of salt. Paris Eternal up to 15th after that surprise win over the Washington Justice. Guangzhou Charge in 16th. New York Excelsior in 17th, and then you've got the winless teams. Vancouver Titans in 18th, we did not see them this weekend. The Immortals Valiant in 19th, we didn't see them this weekend either, but propping up the league on a 0-6 record, it is the London Spitfire, still looking for that win, and not quite sure where it's going to come from in the immediate future, especially concerning the June Joust. We're going to have a pretty big upset next week if London Spitfire are going to pick up anything from this June Joust tournament. I guess, if you're a London fan, pray to the Lord Sparker. That's all I can say. But I will be leaving it here for this one. The socials are linked in the video description as ever for Illusion Gaming and myself. I will be back very soon for Team of the Week and another video concerning what's going on with the EU contenders right now and the Philadelphia Fusion, which should be really interesting. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.